Today we'll be reviewing APUSH, one of the most feared AP exams, but with this cram, it'll become easy in no time. Now, I've taken this exam. I'm going to be honest, there are going to be a few curveballs thrown at you, but for the most part, everything in this review will help you be prepared. So, we're going to first begin with some key vocabulary words, starting from the beginning of the APUSH course's scope and going near the end. So first, the Columbian Exchange. It was the exchange of plants, animals, and diseases between Europe and the Americas. Think potatoes to Europe, horses to America, and smallpox devastating native populations. Next, the encomienda system. It was a system where Spain granted land and native labor to colonists and led to exploitation and the social hierarchy. Next up, the Enlightenment. Very important. Now we're about to get into the very important key concepts. This was the movement emphasizing reason and individualism. It influenced revolutionary thought and challenged traditional authority. Next up, the Great Awakening. It was a religious revival in the colonies, promoted emotional preaching, and challenged established churches. Think about Jonathan Edwards and Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God when you hear this. Next up, of course, the very patriotic Manifest Destiny. It was the belief in expanding the U.S. across the North American continent, fueled westward expansion and conflict with Native Americans and Mexico. Next up, popular sovereignty. Of course, the concept of letting residents of a territory decide whether to allow slavery, in this case for APUSH. You need to think that it led to violence in Kansas and deepened divisions over slavery. Now, of course, popular sovereignty as a broader term is a key principle of the U.S.'s government, but for APUSH, you want to think of the concept of letting residents of a territory decide whether or not to allow slavery. And next up, and finally, isolationism. Of course, this was a value of the U.S. for a while and is the policy of remaining apart from the affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of foreign countries. Now, we're going to take a quick look at each of the periods. First, earlier colonial development from 1607 to 1754. So this covers mostly New England, but also the fertile lands of the South. So we're going to take a look at economic, social, and political foundations of these colonies. Also looking at the Puritan values of Massachusetts all the way to the plantation-based society of Virginia. These colonies laid the foundation for the U.S., so it's important to understand them, even though they might not appear as much on the exam. So now we're going to look at key events on the road to revolution. First, the proclamation that prohibited colonists from settling west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, this sparked a lot of colonial anger because they wanted more freedom, but the UK was restricting them due to their relations with nearby countries. Next up, we've got the infamous Intolerable Acts that taxed sugar and other goods. How did the colonists respond, and what was the significance of no taxation without representation? You should be able to answer all of these questions in your head. Next up, this act required colonists to house British soldiers. How did this infringe on colonial rights and freedoms? Again, you should know all of these acts. Next up, we've got this act taxed paper goods. How did the colonists unite in protest through boycotts and the Stamp Act Congress? Next up, a key one. British soldiers fired on a crowd, killing 5 colonists. Think, how did this event fuel anti-British sentiment? I'm sure you all know what that one is. And probably the most famous of these all, when colonists dumped tea into Pearl Harbor to protest the Tea Act. How did this act of defiance escalate tensions? And next up, these acts were meant to punish Massachusetts. How did they push the colonies closer to revolution? Again, all of these this words you should know, and all of these questions you should think of when you hear them, to spark you into causation, specifically on the LEQ, if you get such a topic. Next up, we've got the early national period covering the 1800s. We're going to look at the Louisiana Purchase doubling the size of the nation to Jacksonian democracy. Through this period, there was explosive growth in the U.S. and profound change. There was the emergence of the two-party system and debates over states' rights. Also, the U.S.'s push westward and its impact on Native American populations must be explored. Also, how did innovations like the cotton gin and the factory system transform the economy and reshape social structures? All these things I just mentioned played a large role in the shaping of the US, specifically around the Jacksonian era. So now we're going to look at some flashcards for Antebellum and Reconstruction. This, at least my APUSH teacher, put a lot of emphasis on this unit, and from my experience with the exam, there's a high chance that you're going to see some stuff from it. So let's get started with the Free Soil Movement. This was the idea that slavery should not expand into new territories, a key platform of the Republican Party before the Civil War. Next up, we've got the Compromise of 1850, a series of laws aimed to resolve disputes over slavery, which included admitting California as a free state and the Fugitive Slave Act. Next up, we've got the Dred Scott decision, very infamous, the Supreme Court decision denying citizenship to slaves and declaring the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional. Next up, Bleeding Kansas. We talked a little bit about this on the key concept of popular sovereignty, but this was the conflict over slavery in Kansas, which demonstrated the failure of popular sovereignty and foreshadowed wider conflict. Next, the Black Codes, something you should definitely know, which were laws passed after the Civil War to restrict the rights of African Americans in the South. We've also got the Freedmen's Bureau, which was a federal agency created to aid freed slaves in the South during Reconstruction, which was seen to be worse than the pre-Civil War era in the South. They provided education, healthcare, and other assistance. And finally, the Civil Rights Amendments 13, 14, and 15 were the constitutional amendments passed during Reconstruction to grant rights to African Americans, including citizenship and voting rights. And of course, the 14th Amendment contained the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause. Next up, another key era, the Gilded Age and industrialization. First, we're going to start with the rise of industrial capitalism here. Now, there's some important names you need to know here, like Carnegie from steel and Rockefeller from oil, along with Vanderbilt. So these guys led to rapid technological advancements and business expansion, which ultimately transformed the American economy. Next up, new immigration. Millions of immigrants arrived in the U.S. seeking opportunity, yet faced discrimination and often lived in ethnic enclaves. We are going to focus a lot on immigration soon, because when I took it, there was a ton of immigration, and I've heard in the past that is a trend. People might not think that it's as significant, but there will be short answer questions about them. There might be DBQs about them, so it's very important that you have context and a lot of knowledge about immigration. Next up, the growth of labor unions. Workers organized to fight for better wages and working conditions. There were unions like the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor that first emerged. These are very important to remember as well. Then, of course, the populist movement. You definitely need to know this. Farmers faced economic hardship due to falling crop prices and rising debt. So the populist movement advocated for reforms like government regulation of railroads and a graduated income tax, which came with the 16th Amendment. And finally, American expansionism, which was fueled by economic interests, racial ideologies, and a desire for global power. The Spanish-American War marked a turning point in this expansionism. All right, now we are moving on to that immigration review. We've got a review of both waves. So first, early immigration. This first wave of immigrants was mainly composed of those who journeyed from Northern and Western Europe. A significant portion of these individuals were English-speaking Protestants, which facilitated their integration into the existing society. Many also, however, arrived with valuable skills as laborers and artisans ready to contribute to a growing economy. There were a lot of skills that would have been in demand during this period, and these immigrants hopped right into those roles, such as carpenters, blacksmiths, and stonemasons. They also helped construct roads, buildings, and other essential structures. Next up, we've got the second main wave. So these two are going to be the two that are mainly covered on the exam, but we'll also go into more recent immigration. So this particular wave of immigration witnessed a significant increase in the number of individuals arriving from Southern and Eastern Europe, such as Italians, Poles, and Russians that kind of formed into their own larger communities and cities. This influx wasn't just about numbers, however, it was about the introduction of diverse languages like Italian, Polish, and Russian, which you might have heard spoken in these bustling neighborhoods. There were also a greater variety of religious practices introduced, with Catholicism and Judaism becoming more visible, adding to the existing Protestant majority. However, this period did bring a lot of challenges for the incoming immigrants as well. The arrival of so many newcomers often sparked nativist sentiments, a feeling of unease or even hostility towards these immigrants, and also increased competition in the labor market, leading to tensions as immigrants were often willing to work for lower wages, impacting existing workers. And then next up, we've got the post-1965 immigration, which was fueled by the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 that officially ended national origin quotas. This wave brought immigrants from Latin America, Asia, and Africa, which diversified the U.S. further, contributing to economic growth, but also facing challenges with integration and discrimination. And finally, a bigger picture societal impact of immigration. So immigration significantly shaped U.S. demographics, culture, and the economy. It has also fueled debates about national identity, border security, and immigration policies, impacting both immigrants and native-born citizens alike. So these debates are still going on to this day. Could be something important for change or continuity over time if you get that LEQ. Next up, the Progressive Era and World War I. This was a large era of reform and global conflict, which went all the way from World War I to the reshaped America throughout the Great Depression and into World War II. The main focus of this should be the Great Depression and the New Deal that FDR brought. So next, we're going to go right into Cold War and civil rights. This is, of course, the largest unit in APUSH. Your teacher probably spent a lot of time on it, and that's for a good reason. This covers a large amount of content and also a lot of key ideas. So, of course, the Cold War began after World War II when the US and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers. This emergence led to a decade-long standoff characterized by ideological conflict, proxy wars, and the threat of nuclear annihilation. The Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan aimed to contain communism. Quick, check with yourself. Do you know what those are? Next up, we've got the Civil Rights Movement. Following decades of struggle, the Civil Rights Movement gained momentum, challenging segregation and discrimination. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. advocated for nonviolent resistance. There was landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which aimed to dismantle legal barriers to equality. Think to yourself, what were the key strategies and achievements of the Civil Rights Movement? Think Martin Luther King Jr., think Malcolm X, all of these people that we look back on as heroes of the Civil Rights Movement. What was going on in their heads? Next up, the Vietnam War. The U.S. became increasingly involved in Vietnam War, leading to a divisive war that sparked widespread protests. The Tet Offensive and My Lai Massacre shook public confidence as the credibility gap widened between what the government was saying and what was actually happening, and the population ended up losing faith in them. The war ended with the withdrawal of American troops in a process that was known as Vietnamization, and also led to the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. Next up, Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. This aimed to expand social welfare programs, address poverty, and promote equality. Programs like Medicare and Medicaid were established. Now, of course, the very famous Watergate scandal. Following the Watergate scandal, President Nixon resigned from office. This event shook public trust in government even further after the distrust that was already present from the Vietnam War. And finally, economic challenges. There was a period of economic stagflation combined with high overall inflation that challenged the nation, ultimately leading to the need for Reaganomics. Think about that causation. And next up, contemporary America from the 80s to the present. So first, we're going to highlight what happened at the end of the Cold War. The collapse of the Soviet Union marked the end of the Cold War and a shift in the global balance of power, where the U.S. emerged as the sole superpower. Next up, globalization. Increasing interconnectedness of economies, cultures, and societies across the globe occurred during this period, leading to both economic growth and challenges such as job displacement and cultural homogenization. Next up, 9/11 and the War on Terror. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 led to the War on Terror and a significant increase in national security measures. The U.S. launched military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq. Think about Desert Storm and Desert Shield. Next up, almost at the end, rising income inequality, which has been occurring since the 1980s in the U.S. due to decline of manufacturing, technology, and new policy. And finally here, contemporary social and political issues. There are ongoing debates about immigration policy, healthcare, gun control, and other issues which continue to divide the nation, as well as political polarization intensifying. Now, it's time to quickly review the free response questions before we end this Cram review. So, as we all know, there are numerous FRQs that you have to face on the APUSH exam. First, we're going to look at the LEQ, or long essay questions, which provide a broader scope for historical analysis. So successful LEQs write a well-developed argument supported by specific historical examples. However, I must emphasize that less is more here. Of course, you want to properly manage your time and maximize it to write as much as you can, but you would definitely want to prioritize clean writing with good evidence, but not too many details, checking off each box on that LEQ rubric that you should know very well by now. And next up, the DBQs, or document-based questions, which challenge you to analyze historical documents and construct an argument using those sources. Now, the one thing that I have to emphasize here is to cite your docs and use HIP analysis. That's HIPP, historical context, point of view, perspective, and, well, the I's not so important, but the HPP is what's really important. Again, effective use of evidence is key. And, once again, cite your docs or you cannot get scored. Next up, we're just going to quickly talk about the importance of historical context. So to write these essays, historical context is key, as is evidenced by its placement in HIP at the very front for the H letter. This means grasping the social, political, and economic climate surrounding events. Context allows for deeper analysis, strengthening your arguments. So, even though I said less is more, fully contextualizing your argument is very important. And finally, a quick word about time management and scoring rubrics. Effective time management is essential for success in these essays. This is a long exam, and at the end, it comes with a lot of writing. There's the 3 short answer questions, and then, of course, the 2 essays. So make sure to allocate your time wisely for planning, writing, and revising. Practice writing under time conditions if you still have time by the time you're seeing this video. And, of course, make sure that when you are practicing, you're looking at rubrics. Study the rubrics. Of course, very important. All right, the link to this course is in the description. Thank you for watching.